This was the pinnacle of women's rights, beginning the suffrage movement and leading many men and women to a new tomorrow. This was the Seneca Falls Convention. This was the first convention that truly catered to women, their rights, and what they felt they deserved. Previous to the convention, women struggled to have their voice heard, and when they did speak out, they were punished. In addition to this, protesting only pitted the small group of women against the whole world. Within the borders of the U.S., women held little political power. Through this contention grew a large estrangement between women and men, which slowly led to the forming of this convention. The Seneca Falls Convention broke ground for future generations of suffragists and feminists alike by establishing that women would no longer tolerate being considered as second-class citizens. These women took a stand in history by establishing that their voice was just as important as any man's. They wholeheartedly resisted ongoing injustices by speaking out for women everywhere. Ultimately, their hard work paid off. Their daring and compelling actions inspired both women and men throughout the country to make a change. The Seneca Falls Convention was a two-day event in 1848 that lasted from July 19th to July 20th. Within this convention, the main topic was women's rights, with suffrage being the focal point. While that wasn't the immediate outcome, the convention did end with a declaration of sentiments, a list of grievances and rights that they felt women justly deserved. There were many people that attended, but the true minds behind this convention were Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a New York-born woman. She was born on November 12, 1815 in Johnston. Stanton was not like most young girls were at the time. She enjoyed classes that were usually deemed for men and participated in sports, something that was also considered very masculine. "If only you had been born a boy," was a statement often muttered by her father, a phrase that she learned to resent. Stanton didn't wish to be a boy. She wanted to be a smart woman and eventually change the world. Her father had a career in law, teaching Stanton a lot about his profession. Using this knowledge to her advantage, she had some very well-constructed arguments for women's rights, much to her father's dismay. Stanton lived her life as a very renowned women's rights advocate, abolitionist, and supporter of temperance. Along with all the action she did for women's rights and abolition, she also formed the Women's State Temperance Society. Later, she married an enlightened man, Henry B. Stanton, a well-known leader of the anti-slavery movement. Elizabeth Cady Stanton passed on October 26, 1902, in New York City, and while she is gone, she is not forgotten for all of her amazing feminist accomplishments. Another creator of the event was Lucretia Mott, born on January 3, 1793 in Massachusetts. She was a widely known face for women's rights and one of the most prominent women of the abolition movement, this logically being due to her strong ties to the Quaker religion. Mott was a key speaker at the Seneca Falls Convention and led many of the discussions. As Mott grew up, she was placed into many situations that forced her to prove her independence. One of these circumstances included teaching. With this experience, she grew sympathetic towards slavery and developed a better understanding of the issues that women faced from childhood to adulthood. She described these very detailed issues in her personal memorandum. With such a strong grip on the abolition of slavery, Mott founded a Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society and became the first secretary of it. She was also elected president of the Women's Rights Convention in Syracuse, New York. Mott passed on November 11, 1880, and is remembered as an influential abolitionist and advocate for the women's rights cause. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott met on the way to the World Anti-Slavery Convention held in London in 1840. Stanton viewed Mott as a role model, which made it easy for the two to become quick friends on this voyage. Within this event, there was a vote which excluded women from the convention. As the women sat in a silent protest, Stanton and Mott bounded even closer together. They were both supporters of the newly budding women's rights movement in the U.S., and they formed a close political alliance. They would commonly exchange letters after this convention where they would speak about formulating a cause or organization between the two of them. 5 women eventually sat together to plan this convention, with Mott and Stanton being the heads of planning. Seneca Falls had a very hasty beginning, according to personal writings by Stanton. They, quote, wrote the call that evening and published it in the Seneca County Courier the next day, the 14th of July, 1848, giving only 5 days' notice, unquote. Through quick planning, the convention was ready to be set at the Wesleyan Chapel. This convention has been described as, quote, the most momentous reform that had yet been launched on the world, the first organized protest against the injustice which had brooded for ages over the character and destiny of one half the race, unquote. I'll bet this convention had a very little formal planning. Many esteemed figures made it a point to attend. A few of these personalities included Frederick Douglass, noted abolitionist and supporter of women's rights; Amelia Bloomer, editor of the abolitionist and temperance newspaper, The Lily; and James Mott, husband of Lucretia Mott and active member of the anti-slavery movement. Within this event, there were over 300 attendees, including 40 men. This opening day was for women only. The agenda involved 2 midday conferences with an evening discourse by Mott. The focus on the second day was the debating of the separate resolutions regarding the Declaration of Sentiments. Men were invited to attend for this day. Through a few rounds of voting, all resolutions were passed. On July 20th, 68 women and 32 men signed the Declaration of Sentiments. Every participant in this signing believed that, quote, all men and women are created equal, unquote. There was a list of grievances that resulted, which became a crucial part of the women's rights movement and the push for suffrage. A few items on this list included: he has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise, this meaning women did not have the right to vote. He closes against her all the avenues to wealth and distinction, which he considers most honorable to himself. As a teacher of theology, medicine, or law, she is not known, signifying that women weren't allowed to be in professions including medicine or law. And he has denied her the facilities for obtaining a thorough education, all colleges being closed against her, indicating that women had no possibility to earn an education. Universities and colleges did not accept female students. Since the convention was planned by only 5 people, and with such short notice, the final results were both astonishing and expected. As anticipated, not every effect was positive. Immediately following the event, Stanton wrote in her autobiography that, quote, no words could express our astonishment on finding a few days afterward that what seemed to us so timely, so rational, and so sacred should be the subject of sarcasm and ridicule to the entire press of the nation, unquote. In many instances, men would routinely come to women's rights conventions and disrupt and harass the attendees with little to no punishment. Simultaneously, satirists would visit the conventions and tease women through rude cartoon representations. Stanton wrote that all over the country, newspapers and journals ridiculed the convention and the people who attended. Due to the negative reactions, many individuals that had previously signed the Declaration felt compelled to remove any former influence that they had had to this convention. The Seneca Falls Convention introduced chatter about the women's rights movement and helped to gain momentum quickly, along with inspiring other women's rights conventions to be held all across the country. Although the world initially viewed Seneca Falls as an aid to a small reform movement, this convention brought about strong feelings and transformed the world's view of this group of women. The convention also unified many strong women, this including the legendary friendship between Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. While Anthony hadn't attended the Seneca Falls Convention, she had certainly heard of it, due to her immediate family that had attended. Amelia Bloomer, former attendee of Seneca Falls, introduced Anthony and Stanton to each other, and they immediately hit it off. Up until their passings, they still remained close friends and confidants, Stanton even dedicating her autobiography to Anthony. Stanton and Anthony became the pioneers of the suffrage movement. About 20 years after the convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony created the National Women's Suffrage Association, with the goal to gain voting rights as an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This cause eventually fused with the American Women's Suffrage Association to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association, otherwise known as the NAWSA. They campaigned for voting rights per state, not for the entire country, an idea originally put into effect by Henry Blackwell and Lucy Stone. Leading up to 1918, 16 different states adopted an amendment for women to gain the right to vote. Due to the ball set in motion that was the Seneca Falls Convention, on August 18, 1920, suffragists achieved a goal that they had been working towards for over 70 years. Women earned the right to vote shortly after the passing of the close friends and forerunners of the suffrage movement, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Examining into more recent times, feminist figures such as Hillary Clinton and Gloria Steinem have cited Seneca Falls as a crucial event in the fight for women's rights. Coming through the second and third waves of feminism, both women have been inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. This establishment, held in Seneca Falls, truly connects the women of the present to these legendary women of the past. Clinton has specifically spoken on the talent of the people who attended this former convention within a speech that she made in Brooklyn, New York during the 2016 election cycle.
In our country, it started right here in New York, a place called Seneca Falls in 1848, when a small but determined group of women and men came together with the idea that women deserved equal rights.
The Seneca Falls Convention has ties into many different points in history after the event. Most modern feminists, as well as former suffragists, identify or identified closely with this convention. This event was the defining moment as the beginning of the women's rights movement. Through Seneca Falls, this group of women were given a stronger voice, a chance to grow, and the platform for a true place to stand within history.